Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day, there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to be talking about such an interesting subject. I can't wait. So welcome to our program, Doni Aldine. Welcome, Doni. How are you?
Hello, I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
I love it. I love it. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will jump in. Now, it's funny. We were chatting before the program because your bio is pretty lengthy. And so we had to shorten it because you have done so many things, but that's all right. I love this. So, a globally mobile Afro-Latina and a first-generation American who, by the age of 19, lived in and identified with 7 cultures on 5 continents. Doni Aldine is passionate about creating community for in between cultural populations. She has presented around the globe as a keynote speaker at conferences, universities, and in media as a lifestyle expert focused on media, marketing, and multiculturalism. With this background, her education, and lived experiences, she developed university curricula for global culture identity and founded the Cultures Global Multicultural Lifestyle Network. Most recently, she consulted on culture for Warner Brothers Studios and Turner Network Television, working with the Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins and Star Trek actor Chris Pine, and branding and culture for Peter Tosh Estate in Jamaica. In 2018, Cultures, the global multicultural magazine celebrating cross-cultural identity, was launched in print and she has worked with Colorado State University, the Denver Post, United Nations, World Bank, Coke, New Belgium Brewery, holy schmoly, that's quite the mix, Odell's Brewery, and Turner Broadcasting. Her publication reaches more than 1.2 million people through email, mobile, digital, and print editions distributed in grocery stores, booksellers, and university and independent bookstores. Doni uses her global and multicultural background, academic training, and career experience in media, management, and business to position Cultures as the first ever digital first print publication and product marketplace of its kind, one that addresses global and mobile cultural identities with emphasis on hidden diversity. Oh my gosh, like I said, so much fun and so many things. So, one of the things I always like to ask my guests is, how did you get to where you are today? I mean, oh my gosh, now I know we could go on for like 3 hours on that, but give us kind of the version, how did you get to the point where you are today?
Well, it's interesting. As you and I spoke, I just came in from out of the country and saw that you needed my bio and clearly sent you the wrong one. That was the one from last year. We actually reached 9 million people now.
Oh, holy schmoly.
Yes. And our goal is to be a household name in the US this year. I'm so excited about that. More so because of the mission of what we do, which is how I came to this. So, our mission is to enhance community and foster human connection, people who have a foot in 2 or more cultural worlds. So that means, and the cultural in between, people who are culturally fluid are usually multi-ethnic, multicultural, mixed race, or geographically mobile.
Okay.
And when you get geographically mobile, you're thinking immigrants, refugees, third culture kids. I fit all of these categories, not the refugee part, but the third culture kid part is the biggest part that I identify with.
Ah, okay.
I fit all 5 categories in terms of multi-ethnic, multicultural, et cetera, et cetera. And third culture kids are people who grew up globally because of their parents' occupations.
Okay.
So while you are forming your identity during your formative years, it really changes who you are and how you see the world. and the perspective is so different. So often you're what's considered a hidden immigrant in your own country. I'm definitely a hidden immigrant in the United States. It's so fun. It's great when I'm in other cultures because they hear my accent and they automatically assume I'm not from there. Now, I grew up in Spain and Turkey and I went to college in Germany and there's Costa Rica and Trinidad and all the things. But I may know more about that culture that assumes I'm not from there
Okay.
than I do in certain places in the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
But everyone assumes you're from here, your
Mm-hmm.
passport's from here,
Mm-hmm.
your accent is from here.
Mm-hmm.
But then once they get to know you, it's like, wait, you're a little weird.
You're a nice combination.
Sure. I don't understand how you think. And so
Mhm.
I bring that up because that is often a TCK or third culture kid
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
And it's how I came to this.
Mhm.
So when I was around 35, I discovered a book called Third Culture Kids Growing Up Among Worlds.
Mhm.
And Ruth Van Reken, who's the author, has been my mentor ever since
Mhm.
then. It's been a long time.
Mhm.
Um, and I was so blown away reading this book because research on TCKs has been done, let's see, by the Japanese government since the 1940s and by
Mm.
the American military since the
Okay.
1950s.
Which makes sense. Mhm.
Yes. And what was happening is students who were, or young people were going
Mhm.
away with their parents and coming back
Mhm.
and didn't quite fit. And they were trying to
Right.
figure out how do we get these people to fit?
Mhm.
Because of course they had these organizations around them too.
Mhm.
If you think missionary kids, military
Mhm.
brats, civil service brats,
Mhm.
airline kid
Mhm.
brats,
Right. Mhm.
all so many different
Mhm.
ones. I run into people all the time. They go, us too. And I'm like, wow, I never thought of that.
Mhm.
But it's so interesting because you at the time think this is just your experience. And for
Mhm.
me, these were quirks of my personality,
Mhm.
things how I thought differently than maybe other people in the
Right.
US or did things differently. I just thought it was my personality.
Mhm.
Well, I read this book and I'm like, wait, no, you mean it's my culture? That I'm a third culture
Mhm.
kid. This is my
Mhm.
actual culture. And these are the explanations for
Mhm.
these things that I do that I thought were mine
Mhm.
that actually fit the whole group.
Mhm.
It was absolutely outstanding. So my mind was blown. And I wanted everyone who had an experience like mine
Mhm.
to understand, truly understand where they came from
Mhm.
and be able to decide which parts of them were themselves and which parts of them were part of
Mhm.
this third culture.
Right.
Um, and that's how Cultures was born.
Mhm.
I actually wanted to do a PhD on it, and only schools abroad really were interested. There's a lot
Hmm.
of people who study this
Mhm.
area,
Mhm.
and they typically do it in Asia and Europe
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
Australia, South America.
Mhm.
But the United States, it's pretty difficult to be able to get a PhD in this subject
Mhm.
area.
Hmm.
And so you and I were talking about
Mhm.
Colorado State, we're talking about CU, and DU, our
Mhm.
two alma
Right.
mater
Right. Mhm.
amongst the three of them.
Mhm.
And I had intended to go back
Mhm.
for my PhD with that, but no one ever really quite understood what I was trying to do.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
the magazine was born.
I love it. I love it. Well, one of the things that I was thinking of is, having all of this, it's almost like you were homeless, or was it that you had multi homes?
You got it. You hit it right on the head. It's both.
Okay.
You're literally homeless and you have homes everywhere.
Hmm.
So they call it rootless and rooted at the
Okay.
same time.
Hmm.
You could be at home anywhere,
Hmm.
because of your mix of cultures and growing up, understanding and being able to weave in and out of
Hmm.
all other people's
Hmm.
understanding. It creates this global understanding that makes
Hmm.
it easier to bring people together and build bridges.
Hmm.
Um, but it makes it more difficult because your
Hmm.
breadth of understanding is so
Hmm.
wide. And most people who grow up monoculturally, their breadth of understanding is very limited.
Right.
So you have a home everywhere. You could be at home
Hmm.
everywhere. At the same time, there's a point where, or part of you that people just don't understand. And so
Hmm.
you feel a little homeless with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I am as single culture as you can get,
Yeah.
and but I remember it was really funny when we were in Scotland and Ireland.
It's
One
one
of
of
the
my
things
favorite places.
I know, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I spent 2 weeks with people who looked like me, right? Because, this redhead freckly face here, is more unusual in the
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
And of course it really was. I mean, people just assumed that I was Scottish, and I'm Scottish. But yeah, I mean, it was so interesting for me to think it was almost I'm home.
Yes.
And my relatives have not lived in Scotland for several generations. I mean, this was not that, but yeah, I mean, it was just, I identified with that simply because I looked like them.
Right. Well, I mean, that makes a huge difference. I mean, you hear it
Mm-hmm.
all the time when people talk about diversity. We focus on the culture part of it.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, diversity
Mm-hmm.
typically is race-based,
Mm-hmm.
and people talk about that. And that visual diversity is
Mm-hmm.
super important, as
Right.
well as the hidden
Mm-hmm.
diversity.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the hidden diversity is
Mm-hmm.
important. But visual being around people who
Mm-hmm.
look like you and
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
supposedly think like them, it
Mm-hmm.
makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
You're not sticking out, you're not on
Mm-hmm.
your own. It's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny. We were just in Trinidad and Tobago at Carnival, and there's one Carnival band that was mostly not melanated people.
Mm-hmm. They look like me. We can just be honest, right? Okay.
Well, it was kind of funny because I
At
thought to myself,
Carnival, that would be unique.
well, I mean, because there's all kinds of people
Right.
in
Mm-hmm.
Trinidad and Tobago. People
Mm-hmm.
often think it's mostly African, but it's
Mm-hmm.
mostly East Indian and then African and
Mm-hmm.
Chinese and Arabic. Um, but I thought to myself, I wonder if this is how people in the United States feel, because for the first
Mm-hmm.
time ever in my life, I thought, wow, they really stand out.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
stand out. And also all the other groups were very mixed. This group
Mm-hmm.
wasn't very mixed.
Ah.
So it
Mm-hmm.
just it stuck out. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I think having people around that look like you is important.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you've obviously been to many, many different countries. And one of the things I was thinking was, part of what we see is, not just cultural and race, but sex.
Yeah.
You're talking about the fact that you're going to Dubai before too long, and you've been in Dubai. I mean, those are clearly countries where women are treated very differently. Not going to say good or bad. I mean, it's just they're
Yeah.
treated differently.
Yeah.
So, what is it like to see that? And kind of and I had a friend who lived in Dubai for a while, and she said it was very interesting. But she actually enjoyed it.
Yes. Oh, before I
Mhm.
answer, what did she enjoy about it?
Now she is Caucasian. Let me put, and she was there teaching at a State Department school. And they, so it was very different. I mean,
Okay.
it was, let's say, sheltered. And so but she's one of these people, she taught history. And so for her, she just absorbed. I mean, she loved all of the culture, all of the history. And but yeah, but there were things that rubbed her wrong, like some of the students at the school were from the king's family, prince's family, all of those things. And she said the boys and the girls were treated very differently. She would not have been allowed to teach a male child from the, and she, that really rubbed her the wrong way, because she just thought, you need to have lots of different viewpoints, right? But she just loved all the history and things like that.
Well, I love to hear that. Well, I'm that way as well because there's
Mhm.
people who travel and
Mhm.
then there's people who really immerse themselves in the
Mhm.
culture. And I
Mhm.
try to, there's times I've traveled, there's times you
Right.
go on vacation
Mhm.
and things like that, but usually I immerse myself in culture, and
Mhm.
that's why I stay
Mhm.
in places a very
Mhm.
long period
Right.
of time.
Mhm.
I tend to live there when I
Mhm.
go, because that to me is the richness of the
Mhm.
experience,
Mhm.
really experiencing the
Yeah,
culture
what
and
you're seeing
understanding
in
the
the Hilton is a little bit different.
yes, so different.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, and it's interesting. Here's the most interesting thing to me. So this
Mhm.
question, very recently, like in the last 2 years, it's come up a lot
Mhm.
that my friends that more resemble you than me.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I bring up certain subjects and I think of it
Mm-hmm.
in the United States as a race thing or as a culture thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they typically say, "Oh no, I always thought that was a female male thing."
Mm.
And I find that interesting. I
Yeah.
really think a lot of it is based on
Mm-hmm.
experience. Well,
Mm-hmm.
so for you, I'm assuming when you think male female, or
Mm-hmm.
when you think of your diversity or
Mm-hmm.
um, being minoritized, being a woman is
Mm-hmm.
the minoritization that you
Mm-hmm.
have, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, I appear, when you look at me, people assume I'm African
Mm-hmm.
American. I'm Black.
Mm-hmm.
So that is my
Mm-hmm.
minoritization that I see first. I see
Mm-hmm.
that before I see
Mm-hmm.
being a woman,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's been interesting that in the last few years, it's come up a lot. So I
Mm-hmm.
think of that first before I think of being a
Mm-hmm.
woman,
Right.
right? And with that being said, I haven't had too many problems being a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are times when it's clear,
Mm-hmm.
and it's clear from a cultural
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. I've had it happen in an airport in Europe
Mm-hmm.
with a Nigerian man, and
Mm-hmm.
how the European I don't know, airport officer was
Mm-hmm.
handling this man, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just so interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, based from my lens, I really do think that white women in America and how what their experience is with men
Mm-hmm.
is similar to how Black people feel, or people of
Mm-hmm.
color
Mm-hmm.
feel about being minoritized.
Right. Yeah.
Because the few times I have noticed that it was me being a
Mm-hmm.
woman, it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same oppression. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same type of, um,
It's the same
people,
feeling in the pit of your stomach. The now
same
wait a
thing.
minute type of. Mm-hmm.
Same entitlement of, I mean, I hate to say it, you could tell me if you agree or not,
Mm-hmm.
but people who have the power tend to make up stories more often
Mm-hmm.
so that they can be
Yeah,
believed.
there's definitely, shall we say, revisionist history.
Yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And my job, I'm still thinking of the same situation
Mm-hmm.
in the airport with the Nigerian man.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, he was saying that he was in front of me and I came from the back of the line,
Mm-hmm.
and that I should have waited back there. And I'm looking at him with my jaw on the floor
Right.
because it was so absolute. I had
Mm-hmm.
been waiting for a half an hour at the front of the line,
Mm-hmm.
and he literally came from the back.
He
But here,
cut.
yes. And
Mm-hmm.
his story when he
Mm-hmm.
got to the front, because I said, and he's not used to
Mm-hmm.
this, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in line. Like, where are you going?
Mm-hmm.
And so the gentleman, the European gentleman
Mm-hmm.
in front of us, is looking at the two of us, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know what she's talking about. She was in the back of the line. Everything that he did, he attributed to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the European man took his side. And the whole time I was like, I couldn't believe. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I mean about
Right.
and when you see
Mm-hmm.
revisionist history, it's like
Mm-hmm.
they know they have the power. As a male, they
Right.
know that they
Mm-hmm.
will
Oh
be
yeah.
believed first.
Yeah.
So even though
Mm-hmm.
this gentleman had been sitting here
Mm-hmm.
looking at me for half an hour, he
Mm-hmm.
literally switched and was like, "Okay, yeah, that story sounds plausible. Go ahead."
Well,
And
and then
I
it's, do you cause a
believe it.
fuss or not? I mean, that's the other
Yes.
thing is, because let's be honest, I think many times we think I'm not going to cause a fuss. And so unfortunately, what that means is we just let them know what they did was okay.
Well, he was clear that I didn't think it was okay. They were both clear that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't think it was
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in such shock
Mm-hmm.
after he said, "Oh no,
Mm-hmm.
she was in the back of the line." Da, da, da."
Mm-hmm.
And then in shock that he said that when it was
Mm-hmm.
obviously not true.
Right.
In
Yeah.
shock that the second gentleman believed it, or
Who
I still
had witnessed it. Mm-hmm.
had been watching me for a half an hour
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
and knew it wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
I was in such shock. So they did know how I felt because I did say, "Hey, where are you going? I'm in
Mm-hmm.
line," that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's happened very often
Mm-hmm.
with people who aren't people of color as
Mm-hmm.
well. I do remember one time, I think I was in Jamaica, and I was in a line, and it was
Mm-hmm.
only me there waiting to go to a ticket counter.
Mm-hmm.
And a blonde woman walked up, and she went to the other side. And now this woman at the counter was wrapping up, and I had been there, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes. And I looked over at this woman thinking, I know you're not going to try to walk
Yeah,
right
you're
up
not
to
going
me.
to try it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I stood there, and I was watching her, and the woman finished, and she looks up and she looks at me and she looks at the other lady, and the other lady started to walk, and I looked at the other lady, and the lady at the counter looked at me. So the lady at the counter pointed to me and she waved me
Ah,
in. And this woman was starting to walk at the same time. And as soon as she waved me in, you could almost see the jaw drop. And I was like, uh-huh, that's how it feels. Well,
Right.
first of all, I had been there for the whole time. But I
Mhm.
think she thought because she was blonde that she was going to get waved up and I would have to wait. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The only other time I could think that happened was actually in Colorado, an East Indian man. I was working with someone at a counter. This happens a lot in retail. And I'm buying some things, and he walks up out of nowhere and asks this woman a question. And she
And you're
actually
like,
stopped
excuse
him.
me.
Yes. So I turned and looked at him and I said, excuse me, we were working on a transaction.
Right.
And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. And turned to her again for her to answer the question. Yes. I love your reaction on that. And then I turned to him and I said, yes, you did mean to interrupt, or you
Because
wouldn't
you
have
just
done
did it again, you putz.
Exactly. And it was so funny because he was so aghast. He could not believe that I brought it up. And the woman behind the counter was also aghast.
Yeah, she's like not.
so
She's probably thinking, I'm not quite sure what to do here.
I do love when I just had that happen in Scotland as well, actually, now that I think about it. But it's so, in both instances, it's so pervasive. The gentleman, I think they actually do mean, oh no, I didn't mean to interrupt. They're just so used to it.
Right.
They're used to being able to jump in and bombard and ask whatever they want whenever they want.
The sense of entitlement.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it's interesting because it really, the person who is the service provider at that point, it depends on if they have, I'm going to say the cojones
Right.
to say
Well,
something, right?
And they can certainly very politely say, sir, I'm
Yes.
going to finish with this young lady. And and then I'll
Yes.
be happy to answer your question. But yeah, it's
I've had people do that. I'm always impressed when they do that. But some
right.
people, they really are intimidated and they will just answer the
Right.
question.
Well, and
Often
sometimes they
takes
think we'll
more
get rid of
time.
them. You know?
Oh, but often it takes more time. It wasn't just a second. And usually I'll speak up again. Okay, this is taking too long.
Right.
She needs to finish my
Yeah,
chance.
we're going to finish what we were doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it puts that other person in an uncomfortable position. And often I think people they're not up for it. They don't know what to do.
Yeah, because they don't want to cause a problem.
Right.
But yeah, you're being treated like you're invisible. I mean, that's the thing is, it's and I have had that happen as a woman. I'll be honest, not all that often. I did have a job, and this was a while ago. I worked as a lobbyist, and this was 30-ish years ago and this was in Colorado. And I tell you, it was pretty much the good old boy white club. And it still to some degree is, but 30 years ago, it definitely was. Yeah. Now, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate were both women. So, that was but and I remember one time I was doing something, and one of our esteemed lawmakers patted me. Now, luckily, he patted me on the top of my head and not someplace where I would have broken his arm, but he patted me on top of my head and he said, honey, you need to go get, and he called, one of the guys that I worked with. But yeah, he patted me on my head like I was a 6-year-old girl. Now I live in the South now. We call people honey, we call people darling, all of those things. As now I try and watch. I don't want it to ever come across as being derogatory or something like that. But yeah, I remember thinking, what the bad words, right? And but I also knew this man was in a position of power. He was a legislator, and I could not cause a fuss. Now, I did I told the guys that I worked with, I said, this is what this guy did, and they set him straight. They said, she is as much a team member as we are. You do not lay hands on her.
Well, that's where you're smarter than I am, because I'm polite about it.
I think it was, I was just so stunned. Like you were saying, I was just like, oh my God, he patted me on my head.
To get out of that. Yes. Yeah. Actually, it's so funny. It's totally off subject, but in Trinidad and Tobago, Felicia Rashad from Grey's Anatomy, was in Trinidad and Tobago, and they had been talking about it on the radio. And I was at the Visit Trinidad office because we're doing all this filming and this different thing. So I turned around and she's standing right there in front of me.
Oh my gosh, I would have been all a Twitter.
That's why I brought it up. My mouth literally dropped open. I just said, for about 2 seconds. And just when I was grabbing my composure to say something to her, because I'm sure she's used to it all the time, turned to go away.
Oh no.
But I was stunned and I just said,
yeah. And if you'd said something, it probably would have been all right.
I've had that happen before. I usually don't get starstruck, but the times I have, it's probably happened 2 times. The times I have, it's pretty shocking. So
yeah, I've done that where I'm and yeah. And usually I can gather my composure, but sometimes not. I just stand there and act like a dingbat.
So but in those situations where you're really shocked that the person did this other thing, yeah, I get it. It's hard to pull yourself back.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's and even just when people say things, sometimes you're thinking, I can't believe that came out of your mouth. And I can do my mother has the one eyebrow up thing. I can do that really pretty good when I need to, but I mean, just other things like I worked with a guy now, this was again 30-ish years ago. He called me honey or sweetie. Now, I think it was just because he never bothered to learn my name. Now, I was the only woman that worked in the office. This was not a complicated process. But he always called me honey or sweetie. And, I let it slide for a little bit. And then in front of the president, he called me honey or one of those. And I responded back calling him honey or sweetie.
And what happened?
It ended. I think it was one of those things where I think he realized, oh my God, and the company president just kind of looked at me and he knew what I was doing, and
the president knew what you were doing.
The president did. Yes. He knew. And he was this wonderful, delightful man. And he would have said something if it needed to be said, but yeah, the guy never called me that again. It was
love a lot, love and lovely. And there's times where I'm like, yeah, you don't really know that person. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah. And or I don't know him at all. I mean, like it might be the person at Starbucks and I will say, thanks, darling. But then I do think, okay, this is somebody who maybe had a name tag on, right? And so I should have used their name. I didn't, and things like that. But it comes back to, we need to treat them as a human. Right. And if they've got that name tag on, or heavens, if you know their name, use that name. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where, treat them with respect. And I always think, okay, if they just called me honey, sweetie, darling, depending obviously on the context, but would I think, really? I
think context is so important because there's times when people say honey, sweetie, darling, and you're like, excuse me, but then there's other times they say love or whatever, and you go on about.
Well, and I see it those times as a term of endearment. Yes. The woman who is our CEO for C-Suite Network is this incredibly talented, incredibly knowledgeable, wonderful woman. Her name is Trisha Ben, and I don't know, somewhere along the line I called her darling, and she melted. She said, oh my gosh, my mother calls me that. Oh. And so now that's always, the thing that I do is if, when we're, and so like we're on a Zoom or something, I'll send her a little private message and I will say, hi, darling, how you doing? But, but I also, because my thought was, when I first saw her reaction, I thought, oh no, I've way overstepped. But she said, I do see that as a term of endearment. Now, would she put up with it from other people? I don't know. But yeah, that's one of the things that we're taught in communications, right? That people love hearing the sound of their own name. So why don't we use it more?
Interesting. Yeah. I love that. I love that.
But yeah. So, let's talk more about the magazine because so it is Culturs. There's
Yes.
no E. What happened to the E? Where did the E go?
The E ran away.
Oh
Somebody
no.
called her darling.
That was it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No,
Mm-hmm.
no, the missing E stands for the hidden diversity of our population.
Ah.
So again, we are this cultural in
Mm-hmm.
between.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the shades of gray. So you'll all
Mm-hmm.
also notice if you go to Culture's website,
Mm-hmm.
our colors are black, white, and shades of gray.
Mm-hmm.
It's because our population
Mm-hmm.
lives in the shades of gray. You have a foot in
Mm-hmm.
one area, a foot in another area. Again, and just to remind you what the
Mm-hmm.
population is, it's multi-ethnic,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
multicultural, mixed race, or geographically
Mm-hmm.
mobile, like
Right.
immigrants, refugees, and third
Mm-hmm.
culture kids. And so the diversity is often hidden is kind of like what I was just saying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm what's considered, and this is a
Mm-hmm.
technical term, a hidden immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
because I look like you, I sound like
Right.
you, but I don't think like you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You think that I'll think like
Mm-hmm.
you because everything else on the outside
Mm-hmm.
looks perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hidden immigrant. There's other people who look like they don't fit at all,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of international
Mm-hmm.
adoptees get this. You
Mm-hmm.
you don't look like you fit. Oh, where are you from? I'm from um I don't know, San Diego.
Right.
Where are you really from?
Yeah.
San
San
Diego.
Diego.
Oh, where did you come from originally?
San
San
Diego. Yeah. And they're like,
like, and so
LA.
people
Mhm.
people get that, and
Mhm.
they're
Right.
the person who's
Mhm.
speaking is trying to say
Mhm.
you're from somewhere else.
Right.
Where are you from, and how did
Mhm.
you get here?
Mhm.
But the person who's responding is
Mhm.
saying, no, I'm from here.
Right.
I think I'm from somewhere
Mhm.
else because
Mhm.
I look different
Mhm.
than you do.
Right.
And and so that hidden diversity, and
Mhm.
of course, there's many other layers, there's many other
Mhm.
dimensions to it.
Mhm.
But that hidden diversity is where the missing E
Mhm.
comes from in cultures, or
I
went to
love
look
it.
at cultures.
I
Yeah.
love it. And it's funny, I was, as you were talking about that, I thought, nobody in America would ever look at me and say, no, where are you from? Now the really funny thing is I tell them I live in Atlanta, but I'm from Colorado. But yeah, it would never occur to somebody, especially because, I have zero accent, or people would say I sound Midwest. But yeah, it would never occur to somebody to ask me, well, where am I from?
Right,
Because I am American,
right,
right? And so yeah, that's just it's kind of one of those where it can be insulting or interesting. Meaning, it's kind of one of those. But
So it's really
um,
interesting because for me, because I'm interested in people's
mhm,
cultures and their
mhm,
backgrounds and their stories.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I will ask someone, let's say they have an accent, and I'll say, oh,
mhm,
I pick up a hint of an accent.
uh-huh.
Where's your accent from?
Right. Yes.
And
Not
depending on,
you, but where's your accent?
well, depending on their life
Mhm,
experience, you can see
mhm,
lots of thoughts going through their
mhm,
head before
mhm,
they answer. And
mhm,
depending on if there's a lot of thoughts, I'll
mhm,
then go the next step and say, basically let them know, here's why I'm
mhm.
asking.
Right.
Because sometimes that's the equivalent for them, the
Mhm,
equivalent of where are you from? You're
right.
not from here, you don't
Mhm,
belong here, why are
yeah.
you?
Mhm,
And so it's really interesting to
mhm,
see people's lived experiences and try to be
mhm,
very sensitive to
mhm,
those. There's times in my life I've even said to people, oh, well, you're thinking this and I'm
mhm,
thinking that. You got to remember, I
mhm.
grew up in XYZ,
Right.
whichever place it
Mhm,
was most important
mhm,
to. And so I don't think the same. But because it is so strong in
mhm,
people that you're sure that I'm
mhm,
an American, that they blow it off. They think I'm making an
mhm.
excuse, or
Right. Mhm,
so often to your point about
mhm,
not wanting to make a fuss,
mhm,
as a TCK, you just don't say anything.
mhm.
You're like, okay, we're
Right.
not having this argument today.
Mhm.
We're not
Yeah.
gonna
Mhm,
bother with it. But it's too bad because
mhm,
people try a lot of times
mhm,
people try to tell you about themselves, try to
mhm,
tell you who they are,
mhm,
try to explain their
mhm.
actions, especially if you don't understand them. And often it's like, how open are we to listening to that?
Right.
Do we
Mhm,
think they're just making an
mhm,
excuse? Do we
mhm,
think they're not listening to
mhm,
you? How much are we really actively listening to
mhm,
that person and
mhm,
respecting who they are?
mhm. Right. Right. And then we add another layer to all of this with LGBTQ.
Uh,
What is someone's pronoun? And
uh,
things like that. And or even just looking at them and trying to figure out what's their pronoun. I had a guest on one time, and his pronoun, see, I get it wrong, was they, right?
Pronoun. Yeah,
But
yeah,
person looked very masculine, right?
yeah. Okay, okay,
and
okay.
and so but I tried really, really hard. I mean, I wrote they in all caps, all of those things. But at one point I did say he, and I immediately said, I am terribly sorry. Their response was, you're trying.
And I
And
love
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
love that.
And I love that. I just thought that was so great. But then I had the opposite one time where, I get the information for my guests from whoever, from the guest, from their bookers, whoever. And they had repeatedly used the pronoun they.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I was just ready, to say they, all those things. But I asked right before the program started, in kind of the pre-chat like you and I had, about the pronoun. He was really offended. And I said, I'm terribly sorry that your bookers, and so I think what had happened was either they had someone who was transgender, or to more than one person, right? Because they is also plural. And they just
Right, right.
hadn't taken that out of the bio. But yeah, he was, oh, I am a he. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, dude, enough. But yeah, it is challenging because we want to honor those choices, but it is, sometimes it's like, but as they told me when I slipped up during the program, they were so honored that at least I was trying. and
Well,
and
I mean, I find it extra hard too when you're in media,
Mhm,
especially if you're a writer.
mhm,
Well, anyone in media is a writer because you have to write your
mhm,
scripts, different things like
mhm,
that.
mhm.
And it's drilled into your head, like to use a plural for a singular is
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that
that's just
didn't
right.
being out of
We
me.
learned in first grade, you don't do that. Mhm.
Well, but I mean, even as teaching journalism at
Right.
university, that was something I
Mhm,
had to focus on.
mhm,
And then came the pronouns, and like
mhm,
you, I focused on
mhm,
it very much. And it was hard. It was
mhm.
hard because it
Right.
had been drilled
Mhm,
into my head.
mhm,
And when you're writing journalistic copy,
mhm,
making sure
mhm,
that the sentences match up
mhm,
properly,
mhm.
because the way we speak isn't often the way we should
Right.
be writing.
Mhm,
And so then now undoing that,
mhm,
it took a lot of effort.
mhm,
I
mhm.
said that to someone and they just rolled their eyes at me, and I thought, okay, we won't bring that up again.
Yeah. Mhm,
We'll leave it alone. But that eye roll,
mhm,
for whatever reason, like I worked so hard at it, and
mhm,
now it's not a problem. Now
mhm,
it's easy for me.
mhm,
I do remember one time I also thought someone was someone else. They had
mhm,
their head down,
mhm,
and both
mhm,
people had close crop
mhm.
haircut.
Right.
One was a he and one was transgender
Mhm,
that went by they.
mhm.
And I thought one was the other person, and I said, "Hey, girly," and they looked up.
Oops.
I know. I was like, "Oh," and so in my head, I'm like, "What do I do? What do I do? What do I
Mhm,
do?" And we're talking for a second, and they had no problem. They
mhm,
just kept talking like nothing
mhm,
happened. Hey, how are you doing? Da, da, da.
mhm,
And then I finally said, I guess I should ask you your pronouns because
mhm.
I was trying to figure out a way to
Right.
introduce
Mhm,
that I realized I made an error.
mhm,
And at that point, the person got upset. I don't know if they were upset
mm.
before, but they weren't going to show it.
Right.
I don't know what happened. To
Mhm,
this day, this person doesn't talk to me. I never did say they they said yes, my pronoun is not girly. Because I also, who knows, maybe
mhm.
the offensive thing was
Right.
girly, like you said,
Mhm,
sweetie, honey, whatever. But I
mhm,
thought this was a friend,
mhm.
and it wasn't. It was someone who was an
And
acquaintance.
you could have just as easily used the wrong name, right?
Yes,
Mhm,
yes, yes,
mhm,
yes. But I didn't try to say, "Oh no, I thought you were such and such person," because I
mhm.
just thought that would add insult to
Right.
injury.
Yeah. It was, you were going to dig that hole deeper.
So I just accepted it. I took the beating.
Mhm. Right.
But that person never really got over that.
Oh.
And for me, I think it goes in all areas.
Mhm,
You have to try.
mhm,
And as long as you're doing
mhm,
your best. And for me, it's having the courage to stick your foot in it,
mhm.
right?
Right.
To make the mistakes.
Mhm,
Because so many people try not to make mistakes, and that's where you make the mistake.
mhm.
Because you're too scared. You don't necessarily,
Right.
you have to develop the courage to,
Mhm,
okay, what if I do it wrong?
mhm,
It's okay to do it
mhm.
wrong as long as you're trying and you learn.
Right.
If
Mm-hmm.
you never learn, that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
different thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you make the effort,
Mm-hmm.
very quickly, especially there's nothing that'll get
Mm-hmm.
you right, um, as getting it wrong
Mm-hmm.
will. I mean,
Oh
you get it
yeah.
right quickly
Mm-hmm.
after that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, like my radio guest. I mean, I was like, they're. I mean, I was not going to mess that up again. But yeah, it is interesting, and of course, now it gets even more interesting because of the focus so much with diversity, equality, equity, and I'm going to get all of those wrong, but because it is so important that we have that diversity in especially our companies, right?
Yeah.
um and so it makes it challenging, which then of course the bad part is you have people that are like, no, we're not even going to try, we just know we're going to screw up, and so we're not going to try. But why is it important that we have diversity and inclusion and equity and all of the other little, words that are in there?
Well, we're doing ourselves a disservice and we're doing our companies a disservice
Mhm.
by not making the errors,
Right.
right? Again, it takes courage.
Mhm.
And when you have the courage to step out and admit that you've done something
Mhm.
incorrectly and try to correct it and
Mhm.
make a difference and sit in the discomfort and
Mhm.
the pain of when you do make the errors,
Right. Mhm.
I do it as well,
Mhm.
as I just told you, that is life changing.
Mhm.
And so some of the world's best companies, Apple,
Mhm.
L'Oreal, Pepsi,
Right.
they're innovative
Mhm.
because of the diversity of their
Mhm.
team. When you have diversity of thought,
Mhm.
again, when we go back to hidden diversity,
Mhm.
I may look and sound like you, but I don't think like you.
Mhm.
That diversity of thought,
Mhm.
that diversity of being, that
Mhm.
diversity of lived experiences,
Mhm.
bringing all that together
Mhm.
to make decisions,
Mhm.
make all of us better.
Right. Right.
Because again, if you think of the breadth and depth of someone's experiences versus another's, you're not going to be able to see outside of your own
Mhm.
box as much as
Right.
you try
Mhm.
until something
Mhm.
happens to get you out of that
Mhm.
box, right? And so when we're able to have others point out, well, what about this? And you think,
Mhm.
oh, well, I never thought about that. Or
Mhm.
that's a thing. Well, of course it's a thing. And then they
Mhm.
explain it. And you're like, wow, that
Mhm.
doesn't happen in my world.
Right. Mhm.
That diversity of thought, that diversity of being, that
Mhm.
diversity of people and lived experiences
Mhm.
is really important to making sure that we stay the best of the best.
Right. Well, and of course, our companies are selling products to a very diverse set of customers. Now there are some that are very specific, and it's more sometimes economically, right? I'm thinking like Rolls Royce, Mercedes Benz, and things like that. But we need those differing opinions and knowledge base in order to reach those markets. It would be just like if you told me I have to put my head in the mind of a 30-year-old male. Well, that's not going to work. So why not have a 30-year-old male as part of our team?
Uh, yes, yes, yes. And there's times that you still do have to put yourself in that
Mm-hmm. Right.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
In teaching journalism, I remember saying when I was trying to get the students, it was very difficult to get people to think
Mm-hmm.
outside of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
But having an open mind is the
Mm-hmm.
best way to do that. And knowing that you don't know
Mm-hmm.
everything, just being
Mm-hmm.
open to whatever is out there and
Mm-hmm.
what other people have to say.
Mm-hmm.
Again, back to
Mm-hmm.
diversity. So, um, when we would talk about, okay, well, what if you, young lady, have to
Mm-hmm.
write for Men's Health?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do?
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They have to put themselves in situations where
Mm-hmm.
they'll be able to write from a point of
Mm-hmm.
view that this audience will
Mm-hmm.
understand. And so when you think of it that way, we're able to do it. We've done it with many
Mm-hmm.
things. There's just
Right.
other things that we have a
Mm-hmm.
block with and we think it can't happen.
Mm-hmm. Right. But a lot of it is we have to open our minds, and think, okay, they're going to use different terminology or different words, all of these things. And, and be able to really put ourselves, and that, I mean, that really shows someone who is a good writer, good communicator, whatever, who can
Correct.
put themselves in those
Correct.
places.
Well, because you always have to think about your audience, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
a business, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
writing, whether it's acting. You
Mm-hmm.
think about the person who's going to be receiving
Mm-hmm.
this and how would it affect
Mm-hmm.
them? how would you act toward them?
Mm-hmm.
And because they're the receiver,
Mm-hmm.
and the receiver is the
Mm-hmm.
one that you want to impact.
Right.
So why would you want to send a message that would be received by a whole
Mm-hmm.
different person? If
Mm-hmm.
this is your receiver, you have to
Right.
make sure that the
Mm-hmm.
message impacts them properly.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that kind of comes to, so you have this statement on Culture's website, and I love this. We live in a wonderful world that is full of beauty, charm, and adventure. There is no end to the adventures that we can have if only we seek them with our eyes open.
Yes. 1,000%.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's back to the open-mindedness.
Mm-hmm.
It's back to just really opening every part of you to
Mm-hmm.
experience things that you may not know,
Mm-hmm.
because they may be right
Mm-hmm.
there in your neighborhood. You don't
Right.
have to go to a faraway country.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go to another neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
necessarily to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you have to, because
Mm-hmm.
if you've taken the time to immerse yourself in environments that are homogeneous as
Mm-hmm.
well, then you're not going to hear ideas different than
Right.
yours. Or if
Mm-hmm.
you shut them down over time,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to hear, people
Mm-hmm.
won't be willing to
Mm-hmm.
share ideas that are different than
Right.
what you may think. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we have to be open on all levels.
Well, and you really, especially now, granted, I live in Atlanta, and so it is pretty much a big melting pot. Um, where I grew up in the mountains of Colorado was
Not
pretty
so
much
much.
as white and as non-diverse as you could get. But it was so funny because I was talking to somebody the other day, and there are, I think, 10 homes on our side of the cul-de-sac here. My husband and I are the only white straight couple.
Ah,
It's we are the most diverse neighborhood. It's very
fantastic.
interesting.
Yeah.
And so we had to stop and think about it, because it was like, okay, because it really wasn't something where it was like, oh, they're this and they're this and they're this. It was like we were just all neighbors.
Yes. And I love that. I mean, my life has been that way. My
Mhm.
world has been that way as
Mhm.
far as I can remember. My first trip internationally, I think I said, was at 2 weeks old. So I'm used to being in
Mhm.
situations like that. And it's interesting. There are people who are used to being
Mhm.
oppressed often can be some of the most closed-minded to other
Right.
people
Mhm.
who look like them,
Mhm.
but may not think like them,
Mhm.
right? So it's been an interesting place to be, but I love hearing that about your neighborhood.
Mhm.
And that is the place where I thrive, when I'm
Mhm.
with in environments where
Mhm.
there are many different types of
Right.
people, many different types of
Well,
thought.
it gets kind of boring if everybody has the same view and the same, yeah, we want to hear about other things. And so that's the thing. It's like, okay, tell us about this, tell us about that. Um,
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
yeah. So it's very interesting. As you know, you were pitched to our program by a group of students that
Yeah.
are studying kind of cultural diversity communication. And I don't know if you know, they sent me sample questions that I should be asking you.
Okay.
And so I bless them. I love this. I love this. And so, it's like, so here's one of their questions. Colorado, you're in Colorado, has a small percentage of Black residents. It's only
Right.
about 4%, right? So how should Coloradoans, and granted this program's airing in March, but how should they celebrate Black history, bless you, not just in
Thank you.
February, but every month?
Well, I mean, for someone like me, it's easy, right?
Right.
Uh,
It's all Black history.
well, no,
Actually, it's
besides the
not.
fact that I'm
It's not.
Black,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I mean, but I'm Afro-Latina, so I feel the same way about
Mhm.
being
Mhm.
Latina, but also, um, you were talking about being Scottish and Irish.
Mhm.
My great grandparents are Scottish and Irish as
Mhm.
well. And um,
Cousin.
you never know. I always wondered that myself. I tell you what, I had the
I
best time. I was just in Scotland and I absolutely
know.
loved it. I was doing a talk at a university, and
Mhm.
then I was with my Trinidadian cousin.
Mhm.
That's where we have our Irish
Mhm.
side in Ireland. And it all clicked.
Mhm.
I love the fiddle. I
Mhm.
love an Irish jig. I
Mhm.
love Irish food. Even my Irish friends are like, I like Irish food. I'm like, I absolutely love it,
Mhm.
right? The heavy soups and stews and
Mhm.
the bread. But it's funny because in each of us, scientifically, it's been proven that we have DNA from the last four
Yes.
generations within our bodies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my Irish generation was within that
Mm-hmm.
time. So it was
Right.
funny to go there and
Mm-hmm.
find out. I didn't know before that I had
Mm-hmm.
Irish ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, now all of this made
Mm-hmm.
sense. Irish dance, Irish
Mm-hmm.
music, Irish
Mm-hmm.
food, whatever. Anyway, point
Mm-hmm.
being, even I like the diversity of all things, not
Mm-hmm.
just, I know the questions
Mm-hmm.
about Black History Month, but the thing where I was going with that is we can all do this,
Mm-hmm.
right? For me, the best way of being and place of being is having as
Mm-hmm.
much culture from,
Mm-hmm.
again, not race, but
Right.
culture from
Mm-hmm.
all
Mm-hmm.
over as part of my everyday world as
Mm-hmm.
possible. That's what makes me
Mm-hmm.
happy. That's what keeps me effective. That's
Mm-hmm.
what keeps me innovative and thinking and learning all the
Mm-hmm.
time and
Right.
finding out things that are different
Mm-hmm.
than are what I thought
Mm-hmm.
they should be. So, in terms of how do you celebrate Black History
Mm-hmm.
Month every month of the year,
Mm-hmm.
every day of the year? First of all, Black history is American history,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Um, we did an issue for Cultures Magazine in 2020. Actually, it's a great story. It was our Time for Change issue.
Mm-hmm.
We were at press,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes about 6 months to go to press with
Mm-hmm.
any
Right.
single
Mm-hmm.
we were at press and George Floyd happened
Ooh.
and we pulled back.
Mm-hmm.
Said we pulled it back and
Mm-hmm.
in 10 days rejiggered the whole
Wow.
issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. To include what
Mm-hmm.
had happened with George Floyd
Mm-hmm.
because I just couldn't. There's no way we could
You
ignore
couldn't
that.
ignore that, not with what your magazine does. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So we did that and it was definitely worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the quotes that I absolutely love from that issue was from a Nigerian mother who is now American.
Mm-hmm.
She and her husband, both from Nigeria, met in the United States
Mm-hmm.
at grad school and had a daughter who actually since then has repatriated. Well, I guess
Ah.
she wasn't from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
She was born
Mm-hmm.
American, but repatriated to Nigeria, her
Mm-hmm.
parents' homeland. Um, but the mom had said to the daughter, who's American, no one should judge Americans, meaning African
Mm-hmm.
Americans, until they learn African American history.
Mm. I
And
love that. Mm-hmm.
it's true. It's so true
Mm-hmm.
because the diaspora around the world,
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm Trinidadian, Costa
Mm-hmm.
Rican, whether you're from any other
Mm-hmm.
place in Africa, and there's many places around the
Mm-hmm.
world that people don't realize there's Africans in different countries in
Right.
India,
Mm-hmm.
South America, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And there are different
Mm-hmm.
perceptions of African Americans when
Mm-hmm.
you come to the United
Mm-hmm.
States.
Right.
So what she was saying is until you learn the history, you will not understand who these people are. And what
Mm-hmm.
you see on TV and what you
Mm-hmm.
see every day, that is not going to
Mm-hmm.
tell you. And it's 100% real.
Mm-hmm.
So back to how do people live this every day? Black history
Mm-hmm.
is American history.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I would suggest that people learn more about real Black history.
Right. Mm-hmm.
When I say real, it's some of the books out there
Mm-hmm.
that we've learned from,
Mm-hmm.
it has whitewashed history or
Right.
has omitted
Mm-hmm.
certain things. When you find out, I mean, the resilience of the people
Mm-hmm.
who are here, it is absolutely
Mm-hmm.
amazing and outstanding. And it changes your perspective
Mm-hmm.
on how you see people
Mm-hmm.
and how you see the oppression that
Mm-hmm.
some people have been able to thrive in, some people have succumbed to,
Mm-hmm.
but it changes your perspective and sees people, and you are now able to see people as more human.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
and with that, so I would suggest people learn history, first
Mm-hmm.
of all. Secondly, and make a point to do it, be
Mm-hmm.
very intentional about it.
Right.
That includes reading Black authors,
Mm-hmm.
supporting Black causes,
Mm-hmm.
supporting Black businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've heard some hubbub about why does it have to be a Black business? Why does it have to be a woman-owned business? Why can't you just be a business? And for me, those are people who definitely want to keep their heads in the sand. If
Right.
you
Mm-hmm.
learn all the statistics, if you learn the
Mm-hmm.
history, you realize, as we started the
Mm-hmm.
conversation with, women have challenges
Mm-hmm.
that men don't have.
Right.
It's just that's how
Mm-hmm.
society is still built,
Mm-hmm.
still trying to overcome them.
Mm-hmm.
People of color have challenges
Mm-hmm.
that people who aren't people of
Mm-hmm.
color don't have.
Right.
It's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while you'll see someone pluck someone very famous out. Oh, but look at so and so. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't have an issue or they're doing so much better than I am. It cannot be a singular thing.
Right.
You have to look
Mm-hmm.
have a holistic view.
Mm-hmm.
So I think learning history, being very intentional about going out there and seeking out Black American history, because it is American history. You'll learn so much
Yes.
about the United States by doing this.
Right.
And I can say that as someone who left here at 2 weeks old.
And as you said, making sure it's correct.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
who wrote it,
yes.
because
Where they come from,
I
yeah.
would put a different spin on it
Yes.
than, and just because I don't understand it, right? I didn't
Yes,
live
yes.
it. And so yeah, it wouldn't be that I was deliberately trying to misinterpret or anything like that. It would just be my
Exactly.
perspective would be different.
Well, it's interesting because last summer I was in Spain all of last summer. I was perfecting my Spanish. My dad's native language is Spanish. He unfortunately passed away during COVID. And so I learned German and French in my studies, but never focused on Spanish because I lived in Spain when I was little and I was like,
Right.
everybody speaks Spanish. I don't want to do that. Anyway, I've been working on it the last couple of years and I was in Spain a few months last year. And to that end, we were talking about Christopher Columbus because it was Thanksgiving in the US, and I was explaining to my friend who was from Spain. He's actually German Spanish. We were talking about what that is and who Christopher Columbus is and what that means in the United States, et cetera, et cetera. And I made some comment about Columbus not being this great guy. And he said, "Oh, well, he wasn't celebrated in Spain." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then he went on this whole, lecture about what they learn in Spain about Columbus, and it's nothing good.
Right.
And
Oh
I
yeah,
was
he was
shocked.
basically an outcast, and
Yes, yes, I was shocked because in the United States, we talk about Thanksgiving and
right, and
1492.
Columbus Day.
All the things. So it does matter where you get your information
Right.
from and what that historical perspective
hmm
is. And supporting other people does not hurt your people. We're all Americans. It's going to lift all of us
Yeah,
up.
it's the the boat rises with everybody.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Yep.
And yeah, and just knowing where we all came from. I mean, because it like you said, we are a huge melting pot. You have Scottish and Irish. I have Nigerian blood. Not quite sure where it came from. And I was like, okay. Gotta love ancestry.com, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and that was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And it's in several of my family members. So it wasn't that, it was just some strange, thing.
Anomaly.
But yeah, and I mean, clearly, it popped that I was Scottish, and I was like, well, that's just a big surprise. But yeah, we have all of this, and even if you're in a country where you've never gone anywhere, you still have all, nobody has been completely isolated,
Yes.
and so we have all of these outside influences, so why not embrace and learn from them?
Yes, 100%. We at Cultures, we say that we activate 21st century cultural
Mm-hmm.
diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned before, when I go to the different places, and in each magazine, we
Mm-hmm.
talk about the history and the culture of the
Mm-hmm.
people. And in Spain, I was really shocked to see how much East Indian heritage, how much
Yeah.
African
Mm-hmm.
heritage was in
Mm-hmm.
Madrid in particular.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even that Arabic and is part of
Mm-hmm.
Spanish. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
words and phrases
Mm-hmm.
that we use, I mean, I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea, right? So as much I'm looking forward to really delving into that,
Mm-hmm.
because as much as we talk about this being 21st century
Mm-hmm.
cultural diversity and people being shocked that
Mm-hmm.
there's people like me in the world, 283 million people, by the way, but as of 2018,
Mm-hmm.
live outside of their passport countries and who grow up with these
Mm-hmm.
different ways of being.
I love it. Mm-hmm.
Well, as much as we're shocked by that,
Mm-hmm.
if we look way back,
Mm-hmm.
that literally is how the world was.
Right. Nobody, for the most, people were wanderers, right?
Yes.
They went where food was. They went, all of those, we were hunter gatherers. And so you went wherever.
Yes, 1,000%. And
Mm-hmm.
so to see all the mixtures and even the cultures that we know
Mm-hmm.
today, many of them are mixtures from other
Mm-hmm.
cultures in the past.
Right.
So I really look forward to
Mm-hmm.
looking through that. But in the meantime, I'm going to do my little piece to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that we are as open-minded as
Mm-hmm.
possible,
I
that
love it.
we embrace as
Mm-hmm.
many ways of being as
Mhm.
possible, and
Mhm.
to really champion this cultural in
Mhm.
between so all of us can
Mhm.
embrace our cultural
Mhm.
fluidity.
I
And
love it. Well, oh my gosh, this has just been fantastic. I wasn't even paying attention to the time, and I looked down and went, "Yikes, we're almost done." Because see, this is why I set the timer. We'd go on forever, right? So tell us more about the magazine. How can people find it? How can they, read it? All those various things.
Yes, yes, yes. So we have done it all. We've been in Whole Foods and Barnes and Noble and Safeway, all the things. What's the
Hmm.
Safeway? King Supers. No, it
Hmm.
was Kroger stores.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna say
this
Kroger
year,
out here. Hmm.
yes,
Hmm.
yes, yes. So this year we've switched it and we've gone to Amazon, universities, and online. So
Okay.
at culturesmag.com,
Hmm. No
cultursmag
E.
.com, no E, cultures with no E.
Hmm.
I spell it because you would be surprised how many times you say it and people still type it. We're so
Hmm.
cultures with no E
Hmm.
mag.com
Hmm.
is a place to find it
Hmm.
online and through universities. So
Hmm.
again, in Boulder, we've been working with the students at
Hmm.
CU Boulder, and they are calling themselves Get Cultured.
I
See
love it. See,
Yes.
see you, big see you,
You
right?
cultured,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they have a website, Get
Hmm.
Cultured Boulder, and there you can sign a pledge to
Ah,
get cultured and stay cultured.
I
So
love that my buffs are doing good.
yes, I've been so impressed with them. They're
Hmm.
really doing
Hmm.
so many things. So it's
Hmm.
been wonderful to work with them. But
Hmm.
culturesmag.com, and then you can go to Get Cultured Boulder to sign up on the pledge.
Hmm.
And we would love it. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you do this, but I could do a discount code for your
Oh, sure. Yeah,
subscription.
yeah. We'll put it in the show notes. Hmm.
Yes, I will send it to you,
Okay.
and that will be great because we are an organization that's supported by our subscribers,
Hmm.
and everything that we do is for our subscription
Hmm.
base. We also have a
Hmm.
membership where you can get immersed in culture 4 times a year, straight
Wow.
to your door.
Hmm.
I mean, it's absolutely outstanding. The
I
food,
love it.
all 5 senses, the
Hmm.
sounds, the sights,
Hmm.
the taste of the particular
Hmm.
culture that we're in. And this next one is Trinidad and Tobago. So.
Ooh, yeah, so much fun, so much fun. Well, oh my gosh, Donnie, this really has been just absolutely wonderful. And I think we need to have you on again because this is a subject that we have to continually be talking about. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to talk about it?
It would be amazing. It would be
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah, but I'm old, probably not going to happen in my lifetime, but maybe, for our students at CU and other universities, it might, where it's just, okay.
It's been
But yeah.
wonderful. We were
Mhm.
talking about the pronouns. It's been wonderful to
Mhm.
see how students of today
Mhm.
they're more adept at
Mhm.
this, I
Mhm.
think, than the earlier
Right.
generation.
Mhm.
So I look forward to seeing where they take it.
Mhm. I love it. Yeah, it's going to be so much fun to see that. Well, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Well, my final thought would be definitely to, make a pledge to yourself. Make a pledge to every day do what you can to be more open, right? If you run, if you meditate, even if you're just making your coffee in the morning, take a few seconds and think, what can I do today to make a difference in my life, in my family's life, in someone else's life? And being open-minded, and it's not like, oh, I'm open-minded, not like that. Being intentionally open
Mhm.
to people who aren't like you, to situations that you normally are not in, is the first step.
Mhm.
And again, we talked about Black History Month, being intentional about seeking out information that's different than you would normally do. That will make such a huge difference in your life, in the life of your family, and the people around you. And I would be extra happy if you did that with Cultures at culturesmag.com.
I love it. So much fun. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having such a wonderful discussion with Doni Aldine. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.